They look like the very picture of happiness, don't they? I guess if we had kids, we might have had a family like that too. Daniel says, flashing a warm smile. His grin is soft, as though he's looking at something dearly beloved. At first glance, anyone might think Daniel, with that expression, is a gentle soul. But the reality is quite different. A small boy, surrounded by kind-looking parents, frolicking with joy. It's a shame for the kid, but I'm about to shatter their happiness. And I'm going to do it in the most terrible way. But all of this, every last bit, is Daniel's fault. If there's any blame, it should fall on Daniel, who betrayed me so cruelly. Their misery is all because of Daniel. My name is Betty Smith, a 43-year-old homemaker. I live with my husband, Daniel. I met Daniel through a friend. At the time, I wasn't particularly interested in romance, but Daniel proactively asked me out on dates. Gradually, I started to have feelings for Daniel and we started dating, which led to our marriage. We never had kids. It wasn't a fertility issue or anything. Daniel was always busy with work and was frequently away from home from the start of our marriage. With his frequent business trips and him being gone for days, we just didn't have much time to spend as a couple. Sure, if we had kids, we could have experienced the happiness that comes with an expanded family. But we were perfectly happy with just the two of us. Even without children, being able to live with the person I love most. It was more than enough to make me happy. I believe Daniel felt the same. But at the same time, I had my doubts. I didn't want to suspect Daniel, but he was indeed always busy. Another business trip? This is the third one this month, right? And this time you're going to be gone for a week? That day, when Daniel returned from work, he told me he had another business trip scheduled. From what I could gather, he had to travel far this time, requiring a flight, and it seemed he wouldn't be able to return for about a week. This was already his third trip this month. Sure, work can be busy, but there are limits. What's more, he's been working overtime daily, to the point where we, as a married couple, barely have the chance to see each other. Daniel, it's really odd that you're this busy. Isn't your company one of those infamous black companies? Maybe you should consider a job change. We could manage our finances for a month or two. I'm worried your health might give in at this rate. Not only daily overtime, but also frequent business trips. Clearly, Daniel's company is not normal. At this rate, Daniel might break down. As his wife, I feel it's my duty to do something about this. With this feeling, I tried to persuade Daniel. No, I'm okay. Work is tough, sure, but it's also rewarding. I'm sorry for being away so much, it must have been lonely. But, working is important for our life together, Betty. Daniel replied with a troubled smile. Indeed, having a job is essential for making a living. But does that mean there has to be a reason to push ourselves this hard? I started to question Daniel's words and the company he works for. Am I wrong? Is Daniel's way of thinking just common? Do I really have to continue my current job to support our household? In the end, no matter how much I try to persuade him, Daniel has no intention of changing jobs, so nothing changes and we continue to live our lives. As usual, our intimacy as a couple is quite minimal. I'm happy if we sleep in the same bed once a week. It's been this way since we got married. I'm sure the reason why we don't have children is because of that. In the midst of this, Daniel happened to have a day off, so we traveled a bit and came to a shopping mall in the neighboring town. Due to the holiday, there were many families, and every time I saw children happily holding their parents' hands, I couldn't help but sigh, wishing we could be like that too. Seeing me like this, Daniel made a face. Stop sighing, it's our day off. Why don't we go eat instead? Looking at the time, it was indeed lunchtime. We decided to go to a nearby diner after discussing it. As it was lunchtime on a holiday, there were many people. Sure enough, there were many families inside. A child, excited looking at the kids' menu. A child smiling, being fed a hamburger by a woman who seemed to be his mother. Every time I saw such happy family scenes, I couldn't help but think about why we don't have children, and all the unpleasant thoughts came to mind. I wondered if Daniel was thinking the same, as he quietly muttered while watching the families. "Kids are cute and wonderful. I wonder what kind of child we would have had." Those words hit me hard. I might be taking it too pessimistically, but it felt like a jab at me for not being able to have children. I wanted children too. I wanted to give birth to a child with Daniel and build a happy family. All of this is because Daniel's job is too demanding. If he had considered changing his job earlier, creating even a little time for us, we might have become a happy family like those people. With those thoughts, I sighed at my own negative thinking. It's not Daniel's fault. Daniel is just working hard for us to live happily. Despite all that, look at what I'm thinking. Maybe I was so fed up with my own thoughts that the food brought to us didn't taste good. I felt like Daniel was looking at me with a displeased face. In the end, I couldn't even enjoy the rare outing with Daniel that day. Since that time, my relationship with Daniel became strained. There was something I felt towards our child, and unconsciously I started to distance myself from Daniel, but I had a feeling that Daniel was also somewhat avoiding me. I knew this couldn't continue, but I had no idea what to do. Because I didn't understand why things had turned out this way. Even when I tried to think it through on my own, I couldn't find an answer, so I decided to consult a friend who I'd known since my school days about the situation. My friend listened to my story sincerely. And, empathizing with my words, they reassured me. "Betty, you're doing your best." But even so, I didn't feel any better. Seeing me like this, my friend looked somewhat puzzled, prefaced their words with, "I wasn't sure if I should tell you this, but..." and then told me something. That revelation left me feeling dizzy. I couldn't believe it. If that was true, then Daniel. From the day I talked with my friend, I started to distance myself from Daniel. My friend's words kept echoing in my mind. A few days later, during the day, I was walking through the residential neighborhood with Daniel. Suddenly, I said, "I want to go for a walk." And though Daniel looked surprised, I was relieved that he agreed to join me. We passed by a certain house. We could see the yard of the house. There, a happy family was having a barbecue. A little boy was playing cheerfully, surrounded by a man and woman who looked like his parents. Seeing this scene, Daniel murmured, "That's like a picture-perfect family. Maybe if we had a child, we could have been a family like that." Towards the joyful family, Daniel cast a loving gaze. At first glance, one might perceive Daniel as a kind person. But the reality is different. Daniel and this family are irreversibly connected. That happy scene is undeniable proof of Daniel's cruel betrayal. That's why I had brought him near this house today. I watched Daniel to see if he showed any remorse, but it seemed he had none. If so, then no one would blame me for dragging him through hell. The child is innocent, but all of this is Daniel's fault. If there's someone to resent, it's Daniel. I made up my mind to punish the traitors. Yes, that may be so. But because of you, they're going to be miserable. I say, gazing at the family playing happily in the distance. At my words, Daniel tilted his head as if to say, "What are you talking about?" and muttered, "Huh?" He seems to be playing dumb, even at this point. What the hell is going on? They and I have nothing to do with each other, right? Sure, I must look like a weirdo for bringing this up out of the blue. But I don't intend to send innocent people to hell. It's because there's a connection that they're sent to hell. There was a tremor in Daniel's voice, or so it seemed to me. From Daniel's point of view, he wouldn't have expected me to say such a thing all of a sudden. Because there's no way his actions so far have been exposed. I was truly underestimated. Well, who knows? Let's just go home for today. We have no more business here, I said, taking Daniel's hand and starting our way home. Daniel, looking uneasy at my behavior, kept saying things like, "What the hell is going on?" and "Why won't you talk to me?" But I didn't answer. The old me would have consulted with Daniel right away if I had a problem. Daniel was a dependable husband to that extent. Well, now I realize that was just to keep up the appearances of being a married couple. When I got home, I didn't talk much, just had some dinner and then shut myself in my room. Daniel, looking anxious the entire time, kept glancing at me, but I pretended not to notice. Late that night, I quietly left the house. Daniel was sound asleep, so he probably didn't notice me going out. I slipped an envelope into a mailbox at a certain house. That envelope was my trump card. I'm sure the owner of this house will be surprised when they see the trump card I've prepared the next morning. All of this is the fault of the traitor. I've just decided to punish the one who betrayed me. If there had been no betrayal, none of this would have happened. Happiness wouldn't have been destroyed. With each step I take, I feel a tightening in my chest as I realize I've come too far to turn back. I can't pretend none of this happened. I can't go back. The next morning, Daniel and I were having breakfast together. It was Sunday, but Daniel had plans to be out of the house for work as usual. Just then, the doorbell rang. Who could it be, this early in the morning? Daniel, suspicious, got up from his seat to check the doorbell monitor. Then, the sight that spread before him made Daniel exclaim. "Why?" The people on the screen were the couple from the house we had visited the day before. A man, presumably the husband, his face red, spoke through the intercom. "Sorry for disturbing you so early in the morning. We have something to discuss, could we come in?" Watching the man, the woman turned pale, exclaiming, "Oh, hold on, please stop. Let's go home. We can't trouble these people." Apparently, it was the man's decision to come to our house, and the woman seemed to have followed him, trying to stop him somehow. "Why are they here? What's going on?" Why had they come to our house? In Daniel's mind, it seemed like their visit to our house was not a good thing. While nodding in agreement, I opened the front door. "You saw that envelope, didn't you? Please come in. Let's talk face to face." As I said that envelope, the man's eyes widened. Yes, it was their house that I had slipped the envelope into late at night. When I invited the two of them into our house, Daniel turned ashen as if flustered. Ignoring Daniel, I made the couple sit down and served them tea. Daniel, who could not digest the situation, kept saying, "Why?" The woman, who was eager to go home. And the man, looking at both of them alternately, his eyes full of determination. The cast was now properly gathered here. It was time for the revelation. "You came here because you saw this picture, didn't you?" I said, laying out the contents of the envelope I had taken out of the cupboard onto the table. The inside of the envelope were the same as what I had put into their mailbox last night. There were a lot of pictures. In each picture, Daniel and the woman were walking arm in arm in the city at night, looking very friendly. Yes, they were having an affair. The reason I knew this was because one day, when I was talking to a friend, she told me, "I saw Daniel walking arm in arm with a woman in the city at night." At first, I couldn't believe what she said. That night, while Daniel was in the bath, I checked his smartphone that he had left in the living room. His password was so careless that even I could easily see what was inside. There were text exchanges with a certain woman. It seems that the two of them have known each other since their student days and apparently were close even before I started dating him. They seem to have drifted apart upon starting their careers, but they happened to reunite at a class reunion and apparently started dating from there. In other words, while he was in a relationship and even married to me, he was fooling around with another woman. This is unforgivable. With this thought, I hired a private investigator to track their movements. Then, the evidence started piling up. Moreover, she had a child. By calculating backwards from the time the child was born, it was discovered that the likely conception period coincided with a week-long trip the two had taken. All this while, I had believed Daniel's absences were due to his busy work schedule. But that was a lie. It seemed he was simply spending time with her, coming home late and frequently going on business trips. She, like Daniel, probably used the excuse of being busy with work to spend time with him, all to avoid arousing suspicion from her husband. This means, the child Daniel once looked upon so affectionately was his and her child. When I explained all this in my own words, the man's face turned beet red and he grabbed the woman by the collar.
It's not like that. Everything she's saying is a lie. That child is yours, there's no doubt.
The woman shouted out in desperation. But the presence of the photographs made it clear, at least the infidelity was a fact. The man's anger did not easily dissipate.
I'm divorcing you. Be prepared,
the man declared loudly. The woman was sobbing, pleading.
Wait.
And
it's not like that.
And I let out a sigh, wondering what she thought was wrong. As I watched their dispute, I casually glanced at Daniel and noticed him breaking out in cold sweat, perhaps feeling apprehensive about the upcoming events. Of course, it wasn't just her who was at fault for the affair. Daniel too needed to face his consequences. It seemed the man was somewhat satisfied with demanding a divorce. His face still held the traces of anger, but he said nothing more and took his seat. It was as if he was passing the baton to me.
Of course, Daniel, you will face appropriate consequences too, okay? Your actions are a clear act of betrayal. And you've been fooling me for years,
I said, smiling slyly. When I first discovered Daniel's betrayal, I struggled to accept the reality and prayed again and again that it was just a dream, but once things started to progress, I didn't feel that way anymore, and all I could think about was sending Daniel straight to hell. My words made Daniel's face turn pale and he fell to his knees.
Please, forgive me. I admit that I was involved with her, but it's you that I truly love. That's why even when she had a child, I didn't divorce you, and I wanted us to stay together as a couple. I would have been fine just being with you, even if we didn't have a child.
Suddenly, Daniel started saying things that were all too convenient. At that, Daniel's words made a woman's face turn beet red as she lunged at him, exclaiming,
What's that supposed to mean?
Ignoring her, Daniel continued.
It was all just a fling with her. I was just under a spell. The only one I truly love is you, Betty. I don't care about the kid or her. As long as I'm with you, that's all that matters.
Normally, being told by your loved one that you're all they need would be something to rejoice about. But I couldn't believe Daniel's words anymore. After all, there was a time when Daniel undoubtedly looked at that boy with love. Because he clearly felt affection for that child. You say you don't care about the kid, but that's a lie. You've been talking about having children for a while now. You've always wanted a child, haven't you? You wouldn't make a face like that if you didn't want a child. You wouldn't say something like, we're a picture-perfect family. For Daniel, having a child might symbolize happiness. But there's no child between us. Because Daniel has been prioritizing his time with his mistress over me for a long time.
I really don't care about the kid. I don't care about her either. All I need is you. Please, believe me.
No matter what I say, Daniel keeps desperately denying it. He really doesn't want to divorce. If we divorce, it will leave a mark on his record, and if his parents-in-law find out, they'll definitely be furious. They hate dishonesty, so if this comes out, they'll surely give Daniel a good talking to. They might even disown him. It's impossible, I can't believe you. Who's been betraying me for years, having an affair behind my back? Who's been disregarding my trust, my feelings? And yet, you didn't want to have a child with me, but you had a child with your mistress without a second thought. There's no way I could believe you after all that. Let's divorce. I can't continue as a married couple with you anymore. I told him clearly. At my words, Daniel looked desperate. If it had been the old me, it would have taken a lot of courage to even mention the word divorce. Because I loved Daniel that much. Despite knowing that, Daniel cruelly betrayed me. That crime shouldn't be forgiven so easily. On top of that, Daniel is trying to neglect even the child who undoubtedly carries his blood. If Daniel hadn't acted so irresponsibly, none of this would have happened. But to even abandon his child to protect himself is unthinkable. Daniel has to take the minimum responsibility as an adult. That's why I can't forgive Daniel here. Rather, I need to punish him and make him face his sins. and make sure he never disregards people's feelings again. The woman he cheated with, her face red with anger, was sobbing uncontrollably. Daniel, shaking off the woman's arm, threw himself at my feet in desperation. Desperately trying to hold on to me, he clung to my feet. Sighing heavily at the sight, I saw Daniel's shoulders shake. But even seeing him like that, I didn't feel the slightest inclination to forgive Daniel. Afterwards, we decided to divorce. Daniel was very reluctant, and we even had to go through divorce mediation. We had plenty of evidence of the affair, so the divorce was granted on the grounds of Daniel's responsibility. Then, I demanded property division from Daniel. Of course, Daniel's parents-in-law heard about the situation, and they were furious. They wouldn't even let him cross their threshold. He's now working day and night to pay for child support. The woman he cheated with was also served with divorce papers and apparently returned to her parents' house with her child. According to her husband, her parents are furious and she's going to be working like a horse with no time for leisure while they're around. Thus, we were able to properly punish Daniel for his terrible betrayal. To be frank, there were plenty of things that stressed me out, and I felt quite worn out. Nonetheless, I felt a sense of relief having been able to administer divine retribution for the betrayal that persisted for so many years. Since then, I've moved and have been living peacefully in a new place. I still meet up often with the friend who helped me during that time, enough to chat about how tough it was back then. Having experienced such a harsh betrayal, I've had enough of married life for a while. I guess I'll be living on my own for a bit. It's my life, after all, so I've started to think that's okay. From now on, I want